Stories have always played a big role in ancient Near Eastern literature, which includes the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Torah or the Tanakh. The Bible, which is a collection of different works by many writers over a long time, takes inspiration from various cultural and literary traditions, surprisingly including those of the Sumerians. The Sumerians were an ancient civilization in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, existing around 4000 to 2000 BCE. They left behind many stories and myths. You can see their influence in the Bible in different stories and themes, especially the Sumerian creation myth, the Enuma Elish. This myth has a lot in common with the creation story in the book of Genesis in the Bible. But how? Well, both stories talk about how order was made from chaos and the separation of heaven and earth. In Genesis 1:2, the earth is described as empty and dark, with God's Spirit moving over the water. The Enuma Elish also talks about this water through the characters of Apsu and Tiamat, which shows similar themes and language. The Epic of Gilgamesh, another Sumerian story, has a flood tale that is a lot older than the story of Noah's Ark in the Bible. The similarities between these two stories, including building an ark, saving animals, and sending out a dove to find land, suggest that the Noah's Ark story might have taken some ideas from the Sumerian flood tale. The Sumerians also had one of the earliest established legal codes, the Sumerian Code of Ur-Nammu. This code had a big influence on later legal codes in the ancient Near East, including laws in the Bible books of Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Both legal codes share ideas like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The proverbs in the Bible are also a lot like Sumerian wisdom literature, such as the instructions of Shuruppak and the instructions of Amenemop. Both types of literature give moral guidance and practical advice for life. The writers of the Hebrew Bible adapted these Sumerian stories to fit their own religious and cultural context, showing the clear influence of Sumerian literature on the themes, ideas, and story structures of the Hebrew Bible. Stories from the ancient city of Ugarit, now in modern-day Syria, also had an influence on the Bible. Ugarit was active during the Late Bronze Age from 14,000 to 12,000 BCE, and their cuneiform texts give us important information about the religious and cultural context of the ancient Near East. These texts from Ugarit include myths, epics, and ritualistic scripts that share themes and contribute to elements of the Hebrew Bible. One Ugaritic text, the Baal cycle, which tells myths about the Canaanite god Baal, shares themes with stories in the Bible. For example, the Baal cycle talks about a god battling chaotic forces, which is also a theme in the Psalms in the Bible. Ugaritic texts also talk about a divine assembly led by a supreme god, El, which is a similar idea to the heavenly council in the Hebrew Bible led by Yahweh. Ugaritic texts about rituals give us a detailed look at religious rituals for different Ugaritic gods, helping us understand the religious practices and beliefs of the ancient Near East. Some researchers suggest these Ugaritic rituals might have influenced Israel worship, including the structure and content of Psalms. The Ugaritic language, which is very similar to Hebrew, provides language parallels that help us understand certain biblical terms and expressions, improving our understanding and interpretation of Hebrew words in the Bible. The Hebrew Bible is also full of stories and cultural ideas that came from ancient Egypt. One of the most important stories in the Bible, called the Exodus, tells about how the Israelites were freed from slavery in Egypt. This story shares similar themes with Egyptian literature, such as the idea of a savior chosen by God and a battle between the chosen person and a powerful king. Even though the Exodus story is mostly told from the Israelites' viewpoint, it might have been influenced by a real event when a group of people called the Hyksos left Egypt. Some religious scholars try to say this two events are the same, but this is unlikely because they happened hundreds of years apart. We also can't find any characters like Moses, Joshua, or Aaron in the Hyksos period. Moreover, the Bible doesn't tell us which pharaoh was in charge during the Exodus, which is strange considering how much we know about all the different pharaohs. The biblical book of Proverbs, which is full of wise sayings and teachings, is very similar to ancient Egyptian wisdom literature, especially the instructions of Amen Moab. Both these pieces of literature give advice on how to live a good life and how to be wise. Some old versions of the Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, even include Amen Moab's text. There are many parts of the Hebrew Bible that use Egyptian religious symbols and images. For example, the prophet Ezekiel uses symbols that remind us of Egyptian religious pictures to share his message. Pharaohs are always shown as strong leaders, and the images connected to Egyptian god and goddesses show how much Egypt influenced other cultures. Even the stone of Hezekiah, an ancient artifact, has an Egyptian ark on it. Also, the songs and religious practices in the Hebrew Bible are a lot like the ones in ancient Egypt. The Psalms, which are songs of worship and praise, are structured and themed similarly to Egyptian hymns and prayers. Legal ideas in the Hebrew Bible are also similar to Egyptian laws, just like laws from ancient Sumeria and Babylon. But of all the different cultures, it's the Canaanites who most influenced the Hebrew Bible. The Canaanites lived in what is now Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Jordan and Syria, and they worship many different gods. Here are some of the most worshipped Canaanite gods. El, or El, who has the same name as the god in the Hebrew Bible, was the most important god in Canaanite religion. He was often shown as an old man with a beard and was known for his wisdom, authority, and leadership. El was also the leader of a group of gods called the Divine Council. Baal was a very important god who was associated with storms, fertility, and agriculture. Baal was often shown as a strong warrior, holding a lightning bolt, showing that he controlled nature. Asherah was the wife of El and was considered the mother goddess in Canaanite religion. She represented fertility, motherhood, and nurturing. Asherah was often shown as a motherly figure, sometimes with a sacred tree or pole that represented her. Anat was a goddess of war and was associated with battle, violence, protection, and wisdom. Anat was often shown as a warrior with a bow, a spear, or a shield. Astarte, also known as Ashtoreth, was the goddess of love, beauty, and sexuality. She was thought to protect fertility, both in terms of human reproduction and agriculture. Astarte was shown as a beautiful goddess decorated with jewelry and symbols of fertility. Dagon was the god of agriculture, grain, and fertility, and was often shown as a fish-like god representing plenty and fertility linked to water and the prosperity of farming. And of course, Yahweh, often called Yahu, was associated with a specific region or tribe instead of being a central figure in the larger Canaanite group of gods. But what was Yahweh's role in the Canaanite religion? Well, it's complex and it's still being debated by scholars. Canaanite stories have a big impact on the Hebrew Bible. The Israelites and Canaanites were closely connected historically and culturally. The Canaanites lived in the land of Canaan, which is where Israel is now. Their myths, religious beliefs, and rituals like sacrifices and temple worship influenced the Israelites. The Bible often talks about the Israelites' interaction with these Canaanite practices, usually saying they are bad and should be avoided. The process of Canaanite god El becoming part of the Yahweh religion in the Israelite tradition is complex and took a long time. El was the main god in the Canaanite belief system, known for authority, leadership, and divine counsel. Over time, El and his son Yahweh became one and the same. In the Hebrew Bible, Yahweh and El, or El Elyon, which means God Most High, are used interchangeably. Sometimes the Bible even refers to Yahweh as El Elyon, showing that they're the same. As the Israelites settled in Canaan, they probably took on some Canaanite cultural and religious practices. The worship of El could have influenced the Israelites' understanding of Yahweh, with Yahweh taking on some of El's characteristics.
Long before Yahweh was recognized as the one true God, there was El. Yes, before the era of worship songs chanting Yahweh came to stay, there was a time when no one gave much thought to that name. This was because there was a more supreme God who ruled over other gods of the Canaanite world, El. He was not a metaphor or a mere pagan echo, no. This was the ancient high god of the region from which Israel was formed. El was said to have ruled from a mountain throne, overseeing a council of lesser gods, and these lesser gods were Baal, Asherah, and Yahweh. Like the Canaanites, the Israelites knew El quite well. His name is etched in the very name Israel, which means El persists, rules. In early biblical texts, the name El appears in titles like El Elyon and El Shaddai. But as Yahweh rose in prominence, something strange happened in the background. El began to fade, not from memory, no, but from manuscript. And now, all we know is Yahweh. But this uncanny happening raises the question, how does a supreme God simply disappear? Or better put, how does another God take his place without anyone noticing? Perhaps it's because Yahweh was not alone. In the oldest biblical texts, we discover that Yahweh did not begin as the one God above all. Instead, he sat among others in a divine assembly ruled by El. When you read Deuteronomy 32:8 in the oldest texts, you see how El divided the nations among the sons of God. In the process of this division, Yahweh was assigned to Israel as a caretaker. He was not the original creator. But as time passed, Yahweh started sounding different. All of a sudden, he gained titles once reserved for El. People began to regard him as Most High and Everlasting. Verses were rewritten and references shifted without anyone noticing. Before anyone knew it, El was no longer distinct. He had been absorbed by Yahweh. But where did Yahweh originally come from? Unlike you thought, the earliest mentions of Yahweh do not come from Jerusalem or Sinai. Interestingly, they come from the southern deserts. We are talking about places like Edom, Seir, and Teman. These are regions outside the traditional Israelite territory. In Bible texts like Deuteronomy 33:2 and Judges 5:4, Yahweh is described as coming from Seir. This is a rugged highland territory associated with nomadic tribes. A peep into Egyptian records and you'll find an intriguing fact. Back in the 13th century BCE, the Egyptian records speak of a group called the Shasu of Yu. The Shasu were a group of nomadic people worshipping a deity called Yahweh in the same desert regions. Can you believe that? And at this time, Yahweh was not yet Israel's God. To the people of Shasu, it was a regional storm deity worshipped by desert clans. To them, Yahweh was a god of thunder, warfare, and wilderness. So how did this desert god end up as the god of creation? Many scholars believe that Yahweh was most likely adopted at first, then elevated. That is, he was brought into the Canaanite pantheon and gradually merged with its high god, El. And their explanation makes a lot of sense. But before you take it in, the earliest texts suggest something even more complex. According to the Dead Sea Scrolls, Deuteronomy 32:8 reads, "When the Most High, El Elyon, divided the nations, he fixed their boundaries according to the number of the sons of God." This version, which is also found in the Septuagint, depicts a clear picture. El Elyon was the Most High, and having such authority, he divided the assigned nations to various deities. To this effect, Israel was given to Yahweh. Yahweh did not choose the nation. He was assigned. Over time, the oldest versions were edited, and the sons of God were replaced with sons of Israel. No doubt, this blinded many to the reality of plural gods. However, that early version remains for those willing to search for it. It shows us that Yahweh was not always the God of all. He was one God among many, operating under the authority of a higher power. But if El was the head of Canaanite gods, and Yahweh underneath his rule, whose voice were the Israelites hearing in the beginning? Before Yahweh, the Canaanite world looked to El. Remember El, the all-powerful God, who wasn't just the father of all gods, but also the ruler of the heavens and the divine head of the pantheon. In ancient Ugaritic texts, El was described as a wise, eternal king, one who sat atop a mountain with lesser deities like Baal and Asherah surrounding his throne. This was the image that was planted in the minds of the Israelites. It doesn't end there. Many early biblical names reflect the same legacy described in the Ugaritic texts. For example, Israel means El rules, Bethel, which means house of El, and even El Shaddai, which was one of the earliest titles for Israel's God. In Genesis 17:1, El Shaddai appears to Abraham and not Yahweh. At this point in history, El was not a fairy tale. He was the original deity of early Israelite religion. On the flip side, Yahweh's name is notably absent in these early accounts. So where was he? In the early stages of Israelite belief, El and Yahweh were distinct figures. You can see it in texts that refer to El Elyon as the Most High and Yahweh as a separate entity. In its ancient form, Deuteronomy 32:8-9 makes this relationship clear. That is, El divides the nations and assigns them to divine beings. Yahweh is given Israel. El still holds authority. In other verses like Genesis 49:25, El Shaddai is paired with blessings of fertility and protection. These are traits unlike the warrior god Yahweh would later become. But this duality didn't last forever. Over time, scribes began blending their identities layer by layer. Yahweh began to inherit El's titles, absorb his myths, and wear his crown. Eventually, El vanished. But before he did, there was a merger no one saw coming. At first, El and Yahweh stood apart. El was the ancient high god, and Yahweh was the desert warrior assigned to Israel. But as Israel's national identity deepened, something began to shift. Yahweh began absorbing El's traits, and this is how it happened. In many early texts, the names of both gods appear together. In Genesis 33:20, Jacob builds an altar and calls it El, the God of Israel. Pay attention, and you'll notice that this is a curious phrase that blends the two separate deities. Slowly, the merger was happening. Also, in Exodus 6:3, Yahweh says to Moses, "I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name, Yahweh, I was not known to them." This is a quiet admission that the patriarchs worshipped El, not Yahweh. But by this point in the biblical timeline, the merger was already in motion. El's name remained, but his identity was being rewritten. The God of Israel was changing silently, so strategically that almost no one noticed. But how were the orchestrators able to pull this off? It's because the fusion of El and Yahweh wasn't just linguistic, it was systematic. At first, scribes and editors began weaving Yahweh into older traditions. Stories that originally featured El were rerouted and attributed to Yahweh. Divine titles like El Elyon and El Shaddai were left in place, but they now pointed to a different deity. This wasn't evolution. It was a calculated rebranding. In later texts, Yahweh began showing up as creator, judge, and king. These were the same roles El had always held. In no time, the language of the texts was edited to give Yahweh universal reach, pushing El into the background without removing him outright. Seems like the perfect movie plot, right? In today's Bible, the merger is nearly invisible to casual readers, but beneath the translations and polished theology lies a clear truth. Two gods became one. And from this subtle act, a new belief system was born, monotheism.
In 1945, a peasant from Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt dug up a jar made from red clay. Inside were 13 ancient manuscript scrolls bound with leather, known today as the Qumran Caves Scrolls or the Dead Sea Scrolls. The rest attracts the attention of all researchers. One of the texts was smuggled out of the country and was even offered on the black market. Parts of it got into the Carl Jung Foundation and turned out that it contained the famous Gospel of Thomas. When Emperor First Constantine convened the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, they examined in details and decided what should remain and what should be removed from the New Testament. That is later known as Christian theology. To put it mildly, they edited and removed whatever suited them, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Book of Enoch, Gospel of Mary, and many others. The universally known theory being that this was done in order for everything to be very easily accessible and understandable to people. But the other theory is a bit more interesting, and it says that the text contained very ancient and powerful knowledge that did not correspond to the direction they wanted to follow, and so the texts were removed. The ideas that we're going to show you today have the meaning to move us all towards infinite growth as souls. It's important to mention that even in the past, there were people that followed these teachings but were burned and killed because of that. They are better known as Gnostics, who unified and shared some of the ideas of esotericism, theosophy, and occultism. Today, we're going to look at this particular not-so-known version of what Jesus had told us. We will look at the Gospel of Thomas. Welcome to the new episode of Secret Origins. The interesting point is that if you're a true follower of what he was saying, why would you deny this perspective, which seems to add even more to the global picture? It's not logical to accept only certain beliefs and quotes about the truth. These are the secret words spoken by the living Jesus and recorded by Didymus Judas Thomas. Jesus said, "Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death." Here, it's suggested to us in an extremely good way the idea that we as existence, as energy structures, as spiritual beings, we are eternal. There are many misleading interpretations of what he meant to tell us, and much of what he had shared as ideas and what he had shared with his students has been altered to gain supremacy, power, authority, and control. Yeshua, Joshua, Jesus had no intention to get more followers, people who were inferior to him. His intention was to create leaders that are equal to each other, and there was no division, but rather a desire to unite and work together in one direction. A lot of what we know today about him is the idea that he was a teacher, if not to all, then to many. Interestingly enough, even the idea that our beliefs create our reality is mentioned in the Bible, saying, "Your faith makes the difference." And doesn't it also say that when Jesus returned to Nazareth, the people that knew him only as the carpenter's son, and they didn't believe the things that others were saying about him, about the miracles he'd done. So he failed in doing any of these miracles in his hometown. Why? It's all about what we believe and what we know that is true for us, what our actions are and what we wish to do. Now it's getting interesting, and especially interesting if you hear those words for the first time. Jesus said, "If those who lead you say to you, 'See, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is who you are, the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are the poverty." What are we being told here? That there are no inferiors and superiors. That if we dive deep in search of the kingdom, there will be always levels, and there will be always something more than this or something less. For the true kingdom, what he actually meant was true power that is within us, and it has always been there. We keep looking for it on the outside again and again, only to realize that it is within us. Socrates, for example, told us that sometimes to study, to learn, is just to remember. So the old saying is very true, the one that says, "Everything new is a well-forgotten old." Why? Because everything already exists here and now. Everything is already available as information. We're the ones who limit ourselves, who create specific systems of beliefs, and who drone our own paths and face challenges of our own making, create experiments to go through, only to realize that deep down inside, we already know. And here we continue with one of the most powerful messages that is so strongly suppressed and neglected, but it's available for anyone who's willing to seek for it. It starts like this: "He who seeks, let him not cease seeking until he finds. And when he finds, he will be troubled. And when he is troubled, he will be amazed, and he will reign over the all." Again, we are told that there are no levels, there are no inferiors and superiors, and the one who's making mindful choices in the present moment, the one who knows his inner true self as a meaning of existence, as a seeker of knowledge, as an explorer of the reality, he will always find what he sets out to find, and then he will rule over the all. He'll be the king of everything that was created and built by his decisions, of everything he has consciously chosen and already knows and has explored long enough. We just want to insert here that the word religion comes from religare, that means return to yourself. Isn't this about the same religare here, a return to our true nature? Return to the already familiar self, to what we have deeply forgotten, so we can perceive it in a new way. The idea is, be this way, be like me, be this way, I am the example for you, I am the way in all its substance, be like me, I'm not above you, be like me, lead with me, walk with me, I am the way, look at me, I am doing it, I already exist and I live that way. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what our end will be." Jesus said, "Have you then deciphered the beginning, that you ask about the end? For where the beginning is, there shall be the end. Blessed is the man who reaches the beginning. He will know the end and will not taste death." The interpretation here, the present. Everything is here and now. The past and the future are an illusion of reality. There is a past as an experience, as a feeling, as an emotion, as memory, as recollection, as nostalgia, as pain even, but not as an existing experience, as something that is real to ourselves in the moment. His disciples said to him, "Show us the place where you are, since it is necessary for us to seek it." He said to them, "Whoever has ears, let him hear. There is light within a man of light, and he lights up the whole world." It already exists. We don't have to look for it somewhere outside, only to finally understand that it exists within us, and we are the regulators. We're the ones who decide how much light to allow, how much kindness to allow, how pure our hearts shall be at that moment to a given person in a given situation. Notice that there is light within a man of light. Where are we coming from then? Jesus said, "If they say to you, 'Where are you from?' say to them, 'It is from light that we have come, from the place where light of its own accord alone came into existence and stood at rest. And it has been shown forth in the image. If they say to you, Is it you? Say, We are its offspring, and we are the chosen of the living Father. If they ask you, What is the sign of your Father within you? Say to them, It is movement and repose." The two polarities of everything that exists. On one hand, we have motion, on the other hand, stillness. On one hand, it's all here and now, there's no time. On the other hand, the moment we realize that there is no time and everything is here and now, we need time and space and movement, direction we can follow, and realize that, in general, that leads to stillness. Those two things are not separate. They are completing each other infinitely and go hand in hand, movement and stillness. Where do we come from? From the light that came by itself. We are her sons, the sons of the light, children of the light, and we are chosen by the living Father. Chosen. We emphasize chosen, the choice, from the living Father, from the one who experiences reality and life and chooses in the present moment from each and every single one of us. His disciples said to him, "When will the kingdom come?" Jesus said, "It will not come by waiting for it. It will not be a matter of saying, 'Here it is' or 'There it is.' Rather, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and people do not see it." Again, the same idea that our inner world that we have within ourselves, the wholeness that we have in ourselves, is already available as information, as one global energy field that contains everything and there's nothing beyond it. It's already available to all and every single one of you who chooses the way to perceive that information. Some of us do it and get that information through their dreams. Others do it through meditation. Others achieve it through breathing methods or techniques. Others trust their intuition, which somehow magically tells them which way to go next. The kingdom spread out upon the earth is exactly that global consciousness surrounding us, or to put it in another way, an egregore. The egregore represents exactly that, the consciousness of all of us, the group consciousness, everyone's global consciousness, not just the human element of planet Earth, because everything is consciousness. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Follow your passion, follow your heart, follow what you truly desire. Otherwise, it will destroy you because you will destroy yourself. You follow many other paths, so many other things that will happen to you, other than your true passion and your greatest excitement, that you will kill your passion. You're going to screw up your life. You're going to destroy your opportunity to experience the greatest joy and happiness of being alive and experiencing what is it to be human. So follow your passion, bring forth what's in you, what your soul and your heart say to you. And the last one. Jesus said, "Why do you wash the outside of the cup? Don't you understand that the one who made the inside is also the one who made the outside?" He meant that the outside has made also the inside. He meant that we are on the inside, we are on the outside. We are on the outside. What we are on the outside is what we are on the inside. In this way, we can easily know ourselves by the way we act with others, by the decisions we make for them, for the world around us. That's how we're going to treat ourselves. This way, we can learn a lesson and move on in the direction of our choice. Of course, we have the freedom to change everything at any moment. If we give ourselves entirely to the physical, we will forget our true nature, our purest form, our spiritual form, the energy form, the one that lies within the material. Because we already know very well, and enough discoveries have been made, that matter is just another form of energy. So the meaning of this also is that if we give ourselves entirely to a life with material gains, if we accumulate riches, material things, in this case cars, properties, clothes, devices, everything that money can buy, and forget and absolutely consciously ignore our spiritual side, then again we will go to this extreme. And the true realization is if we unite these two extremes into one general direction, into one vortex. Unless we realize that what we seek and what completes us will give us the full picture will come only if we unite these two extremes into one general direction, into one common vortex in a global infinity that evolves infinitely. These are one of the secret teachings in these forgotten and ignored writings, and we sincerely hope that those of you who find themselves in these ideas will leave a comment below in the comment section. What do you think about the Gospel of Thomas? How do you feel after watching this video? The interpretations will be not thousands but millions, because each and every single one of us is unique and has the every right to understand any text, any person, any idea in whatever way he finds best. And nobody can tell him how to perceive a specific idea and how he will understand the meaning of life for himself, because each one of us is life itself. Each one of us is also the path itself. Each and every single one of us is all there is. Does the Bible include every single teaching from Jesus? Is there something hidden? Jesus Christ has been a figure of a still ongoing debate, such as whether he really existed or not, whether he really was a son of God and was conceived by a virgin, or he was just a human being that, through his teachings, wanted to increase the awareness about our inner consciousness. As the New Testament, in which carefully were included only the Gospels of 4 disciples, states, Jesus was the living Son of God who came on earth to redeem us from the original sin. But what if there is a different story? What if Jesus is not above us all, but a spiritual leader that wanted to move us all towards inner growth and awareness of our true nature? The New Testament of the Bible portrays Jesus not as an ordinary man, but as the one that has come to save us. He is thus regarded as Christ, a word which derives from Greek Christos, which means the anointed one, the long-awaited Messiah. Jesus from the Bible does miracles such as healing mortally ill people or raising them from the dead. Later on, after he is crucified and then placed in a cave, Jesus is told to resurrect, which is the apogee of his miracles. In the Bible, Jesus is Lord and Son of God in a unique way. He remains forever distinct from the rest of humanity whom he came to save. But what if there is a different story? In the Gnostic texts of Nag Hammadi, you can check our previous episode for more information about the scriptures. We see a totally different description of Jesus. There, he is portrayed as a guide who opens access to spiritual understanding. He is not the real Son of God, but according to the secret Gospels, every human being is a son of God. Jesus is rather a spiritual teacher who raises the awareness of the people. He doesn't insist on being a leader, he only shows the way. It's a bit like Star Wars and the way of the Jedi. In the Gnostic Gospels, the living Jesus speaks of illusion and enlightenment through self-knowledge. It is believed that when the disciple attains spiritual understanding, Jesus no longer serves as a spiritual master, as the two have become equal. As it states in the secret Gospel of Philip, whoever achieves gnosis becomes no longer a Christian, but a Christ. From this, we see that the name Christ did not mean the chosen one, the Messiah, but rather the one who gained knowledge and eventually became one with God. Isn't this what we all should strive for? Become one with all there is, consciously. Christ is a state of consciousness. It's the state referred to in the spiritual community today as oneness or unity consciousness. Jesus was a representative of Christ's consciousness. Jesus says, "I am the light that is above them all. I am the all. The all came forth from me, and the all attained to me. Cleave a piece of wood, and I am there. Raise up a stone, and you will find me there." The Gospel of Thomas relates that as soon as Thomas recognizes Jesus, Jesus says to Thomas that they have both received their being from the same source, which is the divine consciousness. Therefore, we can assume that the main teaching of Jesus as a spiritual leader was the gnosis, self-knowledge as knowledge of God. There's light within a man of light, and it lights up the whole world. If he doesn't shine, he is darkness. Today, Christians believe that Christ was one with God, but Jesus seems to have another opinion. This is one of the so-called secrets. He was saying that the rest of us are God as well, children of the light, connected always and forever with the divine consciousness. He explicitly tells James, "Free yourself from this blind idea that you're merely the case of flesh which encircles you. Then you will reach Him who is. Then you will no longer be James. Rather, you are the one who is." Very close to the understanding that we are all there is. Of course, individually speaking, that means one who is, isn't it? The Gospel of Thomas, being the most well-known one in the recent years, also points that the so long searched kingdom of heaven is not a physical realm of God, but rather a state of being, state of consciousness. Jesus said, "Rather, the kingdom is inside of you and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you will dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty." This quote also points to those who remain closed and unwilling to discover their real selves, and teaches that the lack of self-knowledge ultimately is synonymous with poverty of the soul and the spirit. They will not find the kingdom inside nor outside, but will remain poor and will continue reincarnating until finally they realize the gnosis. It also encouraged the continuous search for the truth. This is the understanding that the so-called way has no end, because the journey to seek is the truth itself, the journey to know ourselves. In the Gospel of Thomas, there are two very important keys of information that were written about 300 years after the time of Jesus. Verse 106, Jesus said, "When you make the two one, you will become the sons of man. And when you say mountain, move away, it will move away." One possible meaning is that when you can marry your thoughts and your emotions in your hearts into one single potent force in your bodies, that is when you have the power to speak to the world. Also, if you consciously decide to focus on one single thought of energy, you will always gain the power to make it a reality, because this is our true power and the well-kept secret throughout the centuries. We are all creators, all living gods who create their own realities. The Gospel of Thomas represents our connection to consciousness and all that is. It is the knowledge that liberates man. People have tried saying this many times and nothing happens. But why? Because the asking is not done with thought and emotion. To ask, we must speak to the field in the language that the field recognizes, and a language that's meaningful, that comes from the power of our heart, from the light within us, from unconditional love. The word unconditional means there are no conditions. Love without condition is the most powerful thing we have. Our heart creates feelings of electrical and magnetic waves. That's the language that the field recognizes. So, when you create the feeling in your heart as if your prayer is already answered, that creates an electrical and magnetic waves that bring the answer to you. It is already proven by quantum mechanics. In the Gospel of Truth, Jesus is described to emphasize on this. Let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished and he will rule over all things. This saying in a way warns those people who decide to take the journey of discovering themselves. Gnostics believe that the gnosis is not appropriate for everybody, since some people are just not ready to receive such a deep understanding of everything and will only lead to negative results. Still, however, those who are ready might also get confused, even temporarily lost, as the acquiring of gnosis changes humans' perspective of the world. Because once you step into the way of knowledge, there is no turning back, and with that comes responsibility. Because you understand how important are the choices you make and even the words that come out of your mouth, because everything moves and vibrates. The question of Jesus' resurrection is also raised in some of the Gnostic Gospels, which criticize the orthodox understanding of resurrection as too literal. Some Gnostics even reject the Gospel of Luke and call the literal view of the resurrection as the faith of fools. Rather, Gnostics look for the symbolical meaning of the resurrection, not of the body, but as a spiritual one. In the Gospel of Mary, the resurrected Jesus is described to appear in visions and dreams, but not physically. Contrary to Orthodox sources which interpret Christ's death as a sacrifice redeeming humanity from guilt and sin, this Gnostic Gospel sees the crucifixion as the occasion for discovering the divine self within. The Gnostic Gospels are very rich in terms of themes and topics. Some of the other main teachings are self-ignorance equals self-destruction, non-attachment to the material world, and non-conformity to the world, meaning that people should be both present in the world, but at the same time should not limit themselves only to the world. Rather, they should understand about what stays above the material world and beyond it. Very similar to the second Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as below, so above. Another important topic is the equality of men and women. In the Gnostic Gospels, women are viewed as equal to men in any way. The Gnostic belief was even followed by a 2nd century Orthodox priest, Clement of Alexandria, who takes the Gnostic thesis and points that men and women share equally in perfection, for the name humanity is common to both men and women, and for us in Christ there is neither male nor female. For Judaism and then Christianity, the main purpose of life is to live according to God's rules, thus redeeming the original sin. People are supposed to go to churches and seek salvation in an outside institution or person and are led to believe that their fate is part of God's plan, therefore transferring the whole responsibility for their lives to God. The salvation as an ultimate goal in Christianity means to go to heaven after death, and it entirely depends on the deeds a person did throughout his/her life. But what if that's not all? Gnosticism again offers a different view of the purpose of life, which is to become aware of the self and thus gain gnosis. For the Gnostics, the kingdom of heaven is equal to the state of transformed consciousness. The more we learn and thus change from hoolic to nomadic type of people, the faster we will reach the final destination, which is to go back to the divine consciousness out of the material world that is full of suffering. In this philosophy of life, Gnosticism resembles Buddhism, as both view the spiritual growth as a necessary part for getting closer to the ultimate goal, or as it is in Buddhism, the nirvana. For the Gnostics, our life journey is one of many lifetimes in which our consciousness, spirit, reincarnates every time our physical body dies, and with every reincarnation, if we follow the path of gnosis, we can become wiser and go further along the way of realization, or stay in the same spot if we remain unaware of our inner selves. This idea of reincarnation is also close to Buddhism and Hinduism, in which the spirit reincarnates into different life forms within different conditions depending on everybody's personal karma. The difference between the Orthodox Christianity and Gnosticism on the matter of salvation and purpose of life is fundamentally different, as the first tells us to look for salvation outside, in Jesus for example, while Gnosticism teaches to seek the salvation inside and to not rely on the figure of Jesus itself, but follow his way of living. Jesus said to them, "When you make the two into one, and when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, the upper like the lower, and when you make male and female into a single one, so that the male will not be male, nor the female be male, then you will enter the kingdom." When you so identify with the light within, when you make the lower self like the God above, the mighty I Am presence, when you purify your chakras, the upper chakras magnifying the alpha or masculine, and the lower chakras the omega or feminine energies. The core of Jesus' message was trying to teach people how to become a whole being by merging their masculine and feminine hemispheres into one, and by doing so to become spiritually sovereign. Because metaphysically, what's actually taking place in the state of the world is that the masculine and feminine energies are in opposition. This conflict is manifested externally as the dissonance around us. We're seeing the masculine and feminine energies are not in harmony. Instead, they're imbalanced and clashing, where one energy is dominating the other and one is being suppressed by the other. So it's all about healing the trauma of the masculine and feminine energy, or the two polarities that are in every one of us. We don't need separation, but unity. To find inner harmony and outer balance, we must synchronize these two worlds and follow the way of the force, or become aware that we are all there is, experiencing itself as a human being. This is the true understanding, and Jesus is one of the many great spiritual teachers and leaders. Mary Magdalene, one of the most mystical figures in biblical history. This is the woman who witnessed the life and death of Jesus, and to whom Jesus revealed a special kind of secret knowledge that later reached us through the Gospel of Mary. Although it is not included in the official Bible today, the Gospel of Mary was an important and highly valued text among the early Christian communities and is one of the most unique of the Gnostic Gospels. The exact date of its writing is unknown, but according to some sources it dates back to the 2nd century AD. Was Mary Magdalene the first among the apostles of Christ? In the past few decades, the Gospel of Mary has grown into popularity mainly because of Dan Brown's bestseller The Da Vinci Code. Brown cites the Gospel of Mary as evidence that Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ were passionately in love, had a relationship, and were possibly even married. Did the Roman Catholic Church know about the secret relationship between Jesus and Mary, and did it deliberately hide it? Well, according to Dan Brown, that might be the case. But is all this true, and does the Gospel of Mary provide historically accurate information about the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene? Did they have such a relationship at all? Or was Mary rather a faithful follower and initiate in the sacred knowledge? The Gnostic Gospel of Philip says, "There were three who always walked with the Lord, Mary, his mother, and her sister, and Magdalene, the one who was called his companion. The Lord loved Mary Magdalene more than all the disciples and often kissed her. The rest of the disciples, seeing that he loved Mary, said to him, 'Why do you love her more than all of us?' The Savior answered and said to them, 'Why don't I love you like her?'" But who was really Mary Magdalene? What we know about her comes more from the later Christian tradition than from the Bible itself. For example, there's no evidence in the New Testament that Mary Magdalene was a harlot. On the contrary, Luke 7:36-50 tells of a woman who was a sinner and who anointed Jesus' feet with a precious ointment. She is an important figure in Christianity, as she is among the first to see the empty tomb and the resurrected Jesus in all four Gospels of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Only later Christian tradition conflates the image of Mary Magdalene with this woman described by Luke, possibly to diminish Mary's importance. The Gospel is written from the perspective of Mary Magdalene, but is not believed to have been written by her, as the writing style, grammatical syntax, and theology suggest that it dates no earlier than the 2nd century AD, long after Mary's time. The manuscript itself is a 5th century Coptic Egyptian version of what was almost certainly an earlier Greek or even Syrian text. According to some hypotheses, it is ancient Bulgarian. The Gospel is the only canonical or non-canonical Gospel attributed to a woman. Mary Magdalene is known as Jesus' favorite disciple and had many followers, especially among Christians in the 2nd century. The Gospel of Mary claims that Mary Magdalene had visions and conversations with Jesus that were not shared with any other disciple. Jesus revealed to Mary a special kind of knowledge because she was considered worthy of this unique kind of gnosis. The Gospel of Mary comprises of 4 concise dialogues that offer compelling insights into the teachings of Jesus, the apostleship, and the notable eminence of Mary Magdalene among the disciples. As a typical Gnostic text from the 2nd century, it contains considerable Gnostic theology and cosmology. It can be seen as apocalypse, coming from the Greek word meaning unveiling, usually referring to secret knowledge. But it also contains a unique insight into the actual metaphysics upon which Jesus based his teachings. It is a foundational text for all seekers of divine wisdom. The Gospel can be divided into 2 parts. The first part describes a dialogue between the resurrected Jesus and the disciples, in which Jesus answers questions about matter and sin and gives the last teachings and instructions to his disciples. Peter said to him, "Since you have explained everything to us, tell us this also. What is the sin of the world?"
The Savior said, "There is no sin, but it is you who make sin when you do the things that are like the nature of adultery, which is called sin. That is why the good came into your midst, to the essence of every nature, in order to restore it to its root." This teaching tells us that there is no universal sin, and sin only occurs when we act in accordance with the nature of sin. Sin comes from us humans when we act contrary to the good in us and follow a desire that is contrary to the good. He further went to say, "This is why you're sick and dying, because you love that which lies to you. He who achieves will achieve." Many gave rise to a passion without likeness, which arose from excess. Attachment to matter produces a passion without an image of itself, because it's attracted to that which is contrary to its higher nature. The result is that confusion resonates throughout the person being. It is for this reason that I have told you to find contentment at the level of the heart, and if you are discouraged, to rest in the presence of the image of your true nature. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. The first part ends with the last greeting of Jesus to the disciples, who calls them to beware of anyone who lead them astray and commissions them to go and preach the gospel. When Jesus leaves, the disciples are upset, but Mary stands up and encourages them. "Beware that no one misleads you, saying, 'Here, here,' or 'Behold, there,' for the Son of Man is within you. Follow him. Those who seek him will find him." Saying this, he left, and they sank into sorrow, shed copious tears, and said, "How shall we go to the Gentiles to preach the heavenly gospel of the Son of Man? If they did not spare him, how will they spare us?" Then Mary stood up, greeted everyone, and said to her brothers, "Do not grieve and do not doubt, for his grace will be with you all and serve as your protection. Let us praise his greatness, for he prepared us and made us human."